It's Combine Week in the NFL, and today I'm going to be answering your questions on the Washington Commanders. Of course, free agency is right around the corner. The NFL draft stuff is just heating up with the Combine being this week. There's a bunch of great stuff to dive into today, but before we get to your questions, go ahead and click that subscribe button right now to join the most interactive Commanders fan community right here on YouTube. We have these live shows every single Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where you guys have an opportunity to have your voice heard right here on the Commanders Report, the fastest growing Commanders YouTube channel here on YouTube. So if you want to get your voice heard on the show, make sure you click that subscribe button and join us Thursdays at 5 p.m. and get your questions in. With that, I'll pause and open it up for questions, starting with Z Banshee 22, and he says, what do you think Curl could be paid a year? So if brought back to the Commanders, I think it's going to be for the franchise tag. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the franchise tag is floating around $17 million for safeties. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I am pretty confident that it's sitting around that range. So probably around that, $17 million per season. And it's really up to you whether you think that that's too much or whether you think that's an appropriate amount, all right? For me personally, I think he's a perfect fit for Dan Quinn's defense. Sorry about that. I think Kamren Curl is an awesome, strong safety. I think he's perfectly built to be that box safety in this defensive scheme, and I want him back, and I really do think the franchise tag is a good idea. But honestly, man, I think he's such a good fit. I would be okay with them finding a long-term extension, and in that case, I'd love to see it be maybe a little bit less than 17, maybe like $16 million per season if they can potentially get that done. Then we got one from Chris Grand here. He says, would you sign Xavien Howard if you were the Commanders this offseason? I'll say this, Chris. He wouldn't be my first choice, okay, because Xavien really struggled last year. There's a reason why the Dolphins let him go, because he was too expensive for how good of a player he was last year. I think his PFF coverage grade was like in the 50s, and that's just dog water. That's terrible, and that's really what he's been known for throughout his career. He's a big physical corner, press man corner, so he fits the system here in Washington. So it wouldn't completely shock me if eventually they sign him, if they can't get some of their top options in the NFL free agency. But at the end of the day, man, he's not my first choice whatsoever. I think there's better options out there that are still playing at a high level, so he's definitely not my first choice. So let me know down there in the comments section, would you sign Xavien Howard this offseason if you were the Commanders? Type yes or type no for this week's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. When that happens, give me a yes or no to whether you would sign Xavien Howard. Then we got a $10 super chat here from Chris Gomer. And he says, in any world, would you see the Commanders take Marvin Harrison at 2 and leverage him down for potentially more picks or something of better value? No, I don't see any situation where they would do that, Chris, because I really do think that they are locked in on taking a quarterback. Now, I understand why people might want to go get Marv, because he is a generational type talent at wide receiver, all right? He's big. He's fast. He's an incredible route runner. He can track the ball in the air better than just about anyone in the draft, and he wins in this 50-50 ball situations. He's a complete wide receiver prospect as we have ever seen in the draft. I completely get it. But if you're the Commanders, you need a quarterback, and you're sitting at number 2, you got to get the rookie contract at the quarterback position, man, because if that quarterback that you draft ends up hitting, that allows you to really open up a potential Super Bowl window with that rookie quarterback contract with a really good quarterback. I just think that's an opportunity you can't pass up, and I don't think there's any way the Commanders take anyone but a quarterback at number 2 this year. Then we got one from my man Verdell Buffington. I hope I'm saying that right, by the way. He says, what do you think about J.J. McCarthy as a QB for the Commanders? I mean, given that the Commanders are going to be taking a quarterback at number 2, and, you'd have to compare McCarthy to Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels as prospects, I don't think McCarthy is really in the same universe in terms of prospects, okay? Because McCarthy, he's more unproven because he just hasn't really thrown a lot of passes in his college career. He was with a team there in Michigan where he could just sit under center, hand the ball off, 30, 40 times a game, and then he would have to throw it a couple times, but usually he'd have great protection and his wide receivers would be open. So he had the best possible scenario for him there at Michigan, and he was never really a guy that was able to carry an offense at the college level. So why are we expecting him to be that type of quarterback at the pro level? I like some of his traits. I think that he's got a decent arm. He's mobile. He's athletic. He's tall. And he's got good intangibles. He's got some good things to his profile. I'm not saying he doesn't. But when you compare it to guys like Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels, two guys that I think could be perennial MVP candidate types of guys that can carry NFL offenses, I just don't think McCarthy compares in terms of being an NFL QB prospect. Now, go ahead right now, click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're going to have breaking news coverage for the Commanders all throughout the 2024 offseason, NFL free agency, and draft coverage as well every single day, 100% free. So if you haven't already, click that subscribe button, and let's get back to the questions. Then we got one from Casey Mosley here from Houston, Texas, and he says, is there no scenario that we give Howell one more shot and trade back to get more quality picks to fill holes? So listen, man, I don't see any scenario where that happens, and here's why. Sam Howell did have his opportunity last year, and you could say whatever you want about Eric Bieniemy and the offensive line and all this different stuff that didn't go his way. The guy led the league in interceptions, all right? He was just not quite at the level that he needed to be. And if you're sitting at number 2 overall and you have the chance to take a blue chip quarterback prospect like they have right now, that they have that opportunity, you got to take that opportunity, man. And you're not going to pass up on that opportunity for somebody that was taken in the 5th round, all right? Frankly, all right? To be completely frank with Sam Howell, I think he'd be a good backup option. I think he's a high-quality backup. I think he showed some good things in his time as the starter last year. But you look at the situation right now, and you have the chance to take a really special quarterback prospect. And, as much as I like Sam Howell as a backup, he's not special in the way Drake Maye or Jayden Daniels could be. So because you're in that situation, you got to take the quarterback, in my opinion. So you decide for me down there in the comments section who should start week 1. All right, so let's say they draft a rookie. All right, sometimes rookies aren't ready. Let me know down there in the comments section if Sam Howell is still on the roster and they draft a rookie, who should start week 1? Type H if you think Sam Howell, or type R if you think the rookie picked at number 2 should get the week 1 start. Then we got one from Soldier for God, and he says, will Fuller get cut? So he can't get cut because he's a free agent. So he's a free agent, or at least he's slated to be here. So the Commanders could re-sign him before free agency starts. They could re-sign him after free agency starts, or they could franchise tag him, or he could go elsewhere. I don't think they're going to franchise tag him, and I think the big question with Fuller is going to be, is he still a fit in this defense? And I'm not sure that he is. He's more of a zone corner, more of a Fangio style off coverage, laissez-faire corner, and Quinn really likes the Emmanuel Forbes types, man, the aggressive guys, the guys that really hunt interceptions. And Fuller's just not that kind of guy. So personally, I think because he is getting a little bit older, because he's not a great fit, I have a feeling the Commanders are going to let him walk. But for the right price, I would certainly bring him back. Then we got one from Troy Yonder, and he says, will Dan Quinn be more successful than Ron Rivera? God, I hope so, man, because Ron Rivera freaking stinks. I mean, he got to the playoffs one time with a 7-win season, and, of course, it was a 1-round exit, so, it just wasn't a very successful run that Ron Rivera had here in Washington. So for the love of God, I hope that Dan Quinn can turn it around, because if we're getting more of the same, or if, God forbid, it's worse than the Ron Rivera era, we're going to be right back here talking about a new head coach pretty darn soon. Then we got one from Bradley Green. Says, do you think Emmanuel Forbes will get better in Dan Quinn's system? The answer to this question, Bradley, is I hope so, and I have hope that he will. Emmanuel is somebody and has always been a super aggressive corner that's always looking for opportunities to get interceptions. I thought he would have been a better fit than he ended up being in Vic Fangio's system last year. Or not Jack Del Rio's system last year, my mistake. It is a Fangio style of defense, but Now that he's getting into Dan Quinn, which is more man coverage, it's more aggressive, it's less laissez-faire, and it's more go out and get the ball, I think it definitely fits Emmanuel Forbes' skill set. He still needs to get bigger. I mean, a big problem that he had last year was that he just couldn't hold his own against the more physical guys, especially later in the rep. So he needs to get stronger. He needs to get bigger. He needs to get into that weight room this offseason, and he just needs to overall get bigger and better. But, I do think that his style of play fits what Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. want to do at that position here. So I'm hopeful that he's going to eventually live up to that first-round draft pick from a season ago. So now predict it for me down there in the comments. Will Emmanuel Forbes boom or bust in the new defense brought in by Joe Witt Jr. and new head coach Dan Quinn? Type boom or bust for me down there in the comments section to let me know how you're feeling about EF. That'll be it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much for all of your support. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button and join us on Thursdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you can get your question on next week's Commanders Report Mailbag.